Hey there, podcast listeners. Exciting news. My new audiobook, The Short Book Formula, a financial professional's guide to writing a book in 6 weeks to attract ideal clients, is out now. And the best part, for a limited time, we're offering this audiobook to you for free. Hurry over to www.theshortbookformula.com and claim your copy now. And now, on to our show. Hey everyone, this is Paul McManus, the host of the $1 Million Producer Show, and I am here today with my special guest, Mike Jesowshek. Mike is the owner and founder of a CPA firm called Jetro. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Paul, for having me. Super excited.
Yeah, my pleasure. Just so that people can get a sense of, who you are and what you do, if you could tell us a little bit about Jetro and what your role in it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a completely digital accounting firm. We started our firm 7 years ago. I'm the founder of the firm and only partner and owner right now.
Okay.
But we've been completely digital from the beginning. So I always say that that's a unique thing because back in 2013, digital accounting firms weren't as common as they are now. I mean, they're still not what everybody is doing, but back then they weren't as common. And so it was kind of a unique journey on what we needed to do to set up our systems, to set up our communication, project management, everything like that, being into a remote firm that really kind of wasn't as common at that time. So we service small business owners exclusively, helping them with bookkeeping, taxes, payroll, those types of items. And we have staff all across the country, and we also have clients all across the country. So we say we're headquartered here in Wisconsin, simply because that's where I'm located. But we have eight team members as well. They're kind of scattered across the country, all working from home as well.
Very cool. So 7 years ago when you started this, and it was less common, what made you want to start a digital accounting firm?
Yeah, so the industry I came from was an online marketing industry, and I was on the finance side of that industry. And it was a kind of very unique small knit group of people in that industry.
Yeah.
And it was all younger generation, people working from home, that this is just how they did business in that industry. So it was a very quick, very easy move for me when going into working digitally, because that's what I was doing previously into that. Now, It was different because it was accounting, which, accounting and digital weren't quite as common as, say, marketing and digital at that time.
Sure.
But yeah, the transition was pretty smooth. I always say my background prior to starting the firm, I was always in private. So I never worked for an actual accounting firm.
Okay.
And so when we started the firm, the biggest thing was it was really good because we didn't bring that typical baggage that comes along with public accounting firms. But we also brought in a lot of experience and things that we didn't really know. And so those first couple of years, it was a very strong just learning curve, trying to understand, okay, how do these accounting firms work? So I say it was a blessing and a downfall, is that we didn't have that prior experience of how to do it, but we also didn't frame our firm off of kind of the traditional broken method that was already there. So the first years was definitely a fun learning experience, but now that we have systems in place and everything else, it was definitely worth kind of that gutting it out in the first couple of years.
Definitely, and it's interesting because right now as we're recording this, we're in, May of 2020, and we're right smack in the middle of the Corona pandemic. Do you have any thoughts or insights? Because you're ahead of the curve, right? I mean, you've been doing this online for 7 years, and now, a lot of people are just, that hadn't done it before are becoming forced to, run their businesses more digitally. Do you have any thoughts or insights in terms of just kind of what the other firms or competition or different people are doing or going through?
Yeah, the biggest thing for us when COVID hit, a lot of people go through that process where they have to say, how do I go from traditional and in an office environment to all of a sudden virtual? And we were able to completely bypass that because we are already in that situation. Now, that doesn't mean that we didn't have any challenges with all that was happening with COVID. But one thing that we're working with other accountants that maybe aren't in our position, how do they get to that position? We've been working closely with other accountants, and it's really something that it's kind of funny because some of the accountants that were working in more of a traditional type firm, we're talking to them, they said, I've always wanted to do this, but I've just never been able to. I never have the time to. And now they're like, I have to have the time because I'm forced to run my business this way. And so, things with them is just trying to get things into the cloud. I think traditional accountants have a lot of stuff that's desktop only. And so in kind of the advising that we're doing with other accountants is saying, okay, what can we do? What are some systems that we can build to get you into the cloud? Because that's going to be the biggest thing, is having access to your data, having access to your team and your clients in the cloud is most important. And so we've been working with other accountants to help them along this journey and say, they look at me and are talking with us and say, hey, you guys are already there. How can I get there relatively quickly, because we have to? And so it's definitely a stepping stone. They can't transition to virtual overnight, and there's no way that'd be possible. But being able to at least make little baby steps to at least get to the point where you can operate virtually for the time being, and then just continue that progress to go virtual from there.
Very cool. So switching gears, what I want to jump into is to understand a little bit more about your ideal target clients, your target market. I know you said small business owners, but I'm also aware that you have, over the years, really specialized in a couple of vertical niches. My understanding is that one is, I think it's fitness studios or gyms and fitness studios is one. And the one that you're doing more recently is focusing on attorneys. Can you tell us a little bit about, let's start with the fitness studios. What was it that got you to niche down and focus in on them?
Yeah. So, as we were growing our firm, we just had good, steady growth, but nothing crazy. And we were just taking pretty much anything and everything. Any client that that came down knocking, we would try to service them.
Which is very common for most service providers.
Yeah. And we got to the point is we felt like we were just number crunchers and tax return filers, where we're just, here's your reports, here's your tax returns, here's your tax savings, move on to the next person. But we weren't able to really dive in and say, hey, we know that this is a problem specific to you, your industry, that other businesses, aren't facing. And how do we solve that? It was hard for us to do that because we were juggling so many different industries that we couldn't really dig into those pain points. Yep. And so we had some very high-end fitness studio clients of ours, and they just kind of fell on us. They owned other businesses and started this one and fell on us that way. And we said, we really enjoy working with you. How can we really, focus in on a specific industry? And that's when we said we need to start niching down so that we can really service these clients at a much higher level than just number crunching. And there's nothing wrong with financial reports and tax returns and tax savings. That's all important, but then just taking it to that next level. So the fitness studios just kind of fell onto us. We enjoyed working with them. We had clients that came into us that way. And so we've been continuing growth within the fitness space. The Association of Fitness Studios is actually one of our clients. So we started to kind of entangle ourselves with a lot of the big name players in the industry and said, we want to get insights into, Association of Fitness Studios as an example, has very deep insights into the pain points of a fitness studio owner. And so we said, we want to create that connection. How can we partner with you to learn what you know, that we can also then take that and service the industry as a whole to better provide guidance in this area? And so that's really how fitness studios came to us. And, as you mentioned, we also kind of transitioned to lawyers recently, which you think fitness studio and lawyer, that's the mix doesn't make sense. And it doesn't. And how it really happened is with fitness studios, we found that we really enjoyed working with the higher end fitness studios, but it also came along with a lot of kind of what we call hobby fitness studios. So it's, they're running small businesses. It's more of just something to take up their time, and they're making a little bit of money, but nothing crazy. And, we found that made up not a very good portion of the industry. And so we said, how do we diversify a little bit? And this is a transition we made over probably 2 years ago now, which really kind of helped us out in this COVID atmosphere that we're living in now. But we said, how can we diversify a little bit and take, we really like fitness studios and we like working for them, but can we maybe add on another one that we focus on and really like? And so we looked at all different types of options, our client base, and said, what are pluses or minuses in various different industries. And we've kind of keyed in on lawyers a little bit for a couple different reasons. Fairly stable. They usually make pretty decent money. They're willing to understand, and they understand the value accountant can bring them because the hourly fee, we don't charge hourly fees, but they're used to doing hourly fees so they can pinpoint value to $1 price per hour.
Sure.
And we actually had a CPA on our staff that spent the majority of his career working with law firms. And so we kind of took all that to add it together and said, we like the attributes of this industry. We have a team member that is a specialist. He wrote a book specific to law firm strategic planning. And we said, let's kind of marry those together and let's maybe add on that as a second niche. But one thing that we wanted to make apparent is that we're not just we're not just taking an industry and then adding onto it, because eventually then we're going to come back to what we started with, a bunch of different industries that we can't really specialize in. So we wanted to really kind of nail down two that our team could really wrap their head around and say, hey, we know the ins and outs of this industry great, or two industries. And that's kind of where we landed on fitness studios and law firms. And it's been kind of funny because we actually have one client that is a lawyer that owns a fitness studio. So I don't think that that's pretty typical, but I'm like, you're our perfect client. Like, there's nothing better than you as a client because you fit both of our specialties.
That would be a very narrow niche.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So I work with obviously a lot of financial advisors, and oftentimes they, when I start working with them, oftentimes they don't have a specific target audience. I mean, most people, not just financial advisors, but most service providers, typically are of the mindset, hey, I want a customer, maybe it's like a business owner, but they haven't, gone as far as, say, fitness studios or attorneys. When I start working with them, typically, we look at the different options, what might make sense. And attorneys oftentimes come up because, just compared to other markets, they typically have higher income, higher assets, et cetera. But I want to go a little bit deeper in terms of, it's one thing to say, okay, I want to work with attorneys, and there's some pros and cons there, but, I think there's a lot of pros, especially if you're looking to go after high net worth, high income individuals. But conversely, why does an attorney want to work with you? And I think you started talking about it in terms of your team, but I'd love to go a little bit deeper because, as much as you just say, I want to work with attorneys, you have to not convince, but you have to demonstrate value to the attorney so that they want to and choose to work with you compared to all the different alternatives that they have available to them. So tell me a little bit more, if you would, why do attorneys choose to work with you, with your firm?
Yeah. So, especially when you're just starting out or first picking a niche, that's very difficult because you can't say, well, we've been working with them for years. We've been doing this, helping these types of clients, if you don't have one or you don't have multiple of them. And so the biggest thing that we found is, the fitness studio kind of fell in our lap. And then we got another fitness studio, and then we got another fitness studio. And also it's like, hey, these people we really enjoy working with. And so when we first decided when we pick a niche and say, this is what we're going to specialize into, my point of view is that we need to really dig in and just interview people that are maybe not even clients of ours, but get the idea of what is that strong pain point. Yeah. And so by doing that analysis and saying, okay, we talked to 50 fitness studios or 10 or 5, whatever it is, fitness studios in different types of fitness and different types of areas of the country. And there seems to be a theme, these 4 things continually come up, or with attorneys, same thing, about things that are kind of a pain point for them. And then you're saying, okay, what can we do based on knowing what their pain point is and our knowledge and expertise? What service offering or what can we offer them to say, yes, we're the person that's going to be your tax accounting advisor. And so when it came to attorneys, as you kind of mentioned, we had a team member that spent his entire career working with law firms. So he's worked inside of law firms as a CFO. He's worked as an independent consultant to law firms as a virtual CFO of sort, where, he would just come in on a once weekly basis for smaller firms. And he's worked with firms from 500 employees to one attorney. And so that brought in a good breadth of knowledge. And when we decided to start working with them, a lot of that, what is the pain points he could bring to us, because he saw it in different parts of the industry. And so once you know the pain points, and once you have a solution to fix those pain points, then it's just about how do you articulate that when you're talking to clients? How do you explain that that's what that is? And so that can oftentimes be the hard part too, because knowing exactly what they're going to be looking for. And the best thing that we do is we try to put ourselves into their shoes. And we want to try to put ourselves into their shoes and pretend that we're kind of this annoying sales guy that just won't leave us alone. And we say, if we're that attorney that has these pain points, but this annoying sales guy that we want to say no to at all possible, what would he have to do to make us say yes? And that's kind of, I say annoying salesperson. We're not that type of people, but I say that because everyone wants to say it and find a way to say no to a salesperson. So if someone that we know we want to say no to can say something that makes us say we have to say yes, what is that going to be? And so that's why I kind of phrase it that way. And so that's really how we say, how are we going to go to market with attorneys? How are we going to show them the value we can bring? It's putting us in their shoes and saying what is an offer, or what is a service offering, or what is something that they can't refuse. And a lot of times that's a long process. We might have an attorney in a pipeline for 6 months where we're giving them free information. We're doing webinars with them. And finally they're like, hey, I've seen what you've been doing for the past 6 months and I'm ready. You've sold me just on that fact of being able to provide all this good content without even me being a client of yours. It's been giving me an advantage. So that's really one way. Content, free information. That's one way that we utilize kind of getting clients to understand how our process works. And it also gives them to say, yeah, I like your personality, or yeah, I like the way you do things. If we're talking about a free tax strategy, you're like, yeah, I kind of like the way that you think about that. But it also takes out the people that say, no, I don't like that relationship. I want to have an accountant that I can go down to his office to. Well, they're going to say, they're going to take what we say and they're going to go to their accountant and say, hey, this guy's doing this. Can you give me some more insights on that? And that's totally fine with us too, because it helps build us trust with those people.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many things that you said there that are, from my point of view, are just spot on in terms of marketing. One of the interesting things is, from my vantage point, is that when you go online, it's such a noisy, crowded field. And one, if you don't choose a niche or multiple niches, vertical markets, one, it's just hard to stand out. It's hard to say, okay, who am I going to go after? But then conversely, from the client standpoint, I mean, it's not just as simply as us choosing who we want to work with. They have to choose us as well. And there's a lot of people that might be comfortable just working with their local, financial advisor, their local CPA, their local firm. And so to really stand out online, we have to go above and beyond to show them why we're the right fit for them. And sometimes it's a matter of disqualifying people, right? Sometimes it's a matter of, by being present, by allowing people to check you out online, sometimes they say, you know what? I don't really like that Paul guy. He's kind of annoying. I'm going to go with my local guy. It's like, great. It saved us the hassle of a conversation. But then more often than not, when someone actually does show up at your doorstep, on, figuratively speaking, they already know so much about you. I mean, you met them for the first time, but they already know so much about you that they already know the ins and outs. They're ready to move forward. And so I just love everything that you're saying. One of the things that I'm aware of that you're doing from a marketing strategy is that you have a podcast. Can you share more about the value of having a podcast has been for you, why you started it, and what the value has been of actively doing a podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to go back to one of your points, the funny thing is that before you start to niche down, that every single business owner that comes to you isn't necessarily going to be a good fit. And so when you do niche down, that even stays true then. Every single lawyer that comes to us isn't necessarily a good fit. So it's being able to know that and not trying to force kind of relationships that way.
Exactly.
But the podcast, this was a funny thing. We were doing videos and just putting them up on YouTube just sporadically. So, client would have a question on something, we'd show up, pop a quick video up on YouTube. And at one time we said, okay, well, we already have the content. We already have some videos. Let's put it on a podcast. So we started the Small Business Tax Savings Podcast, and we took one of these videos and just put it on there. And then like a week later, I put another one on, and a week later, I put another one on. And this was probably in April of, this would have been 2018 now. And about 3 to 4 months later, I got an email that says, "Hey, I've been listening to your podcast, and I would like to jump on a phone call." And it just kind of blew me away. I'm like, podcast? What podcast was I on? And then I came to realize, oh, that's that one that we created a while back. And so people started to find it. And so at that point, we're like, wait, we haven't even put any effort into this thing. We just put old videos on this podcast, and there's people finding us. And so then we made it to the point of say, I think we need to start doing this more often. And so it was at that point we said, we're going to start doing podcasts on a weekly basis, short, quick hit items. So it's usually a tax tip, a bookkeeping tip, something like that, where it's 5 to 15 minutes long. Sometimes we have a special guest on where we might go a little bit longer, but typically it's in that 5 to 15 minute range, and just sharing a podcast every week and just being consistent with it. Because obviously when we first started, there was no consistency. It was just throwing audio up on a podcast. So we started to do that and started to get more people following us, started to get more listeners, starting to get more people reach out to us. And so now we really kind of use the podcast as a three-prong approach. One, it's a way to find clients. So clients find us that way. The beauty about this is that when they do find us, they've been listening to me for 2 years. And so when I jump on a phone call with them, I don't have to prove to them or explain who I am or anything like that. They know me more than I know them because they've been listening to me for so long.
Well, and to just add to that, it's almost the reverse. I mean, you have such good positioning then where even though you're technically the salesperson and they're technically the prospect, it becomes a matter of almost they have to demonstrate to you that they're a good fit for you.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's kind of one prong approach, obviously potential new clients. The second piece to it is that if we're talking about a tax strategy, so let's just say we're talking about basic strategy about how to hire your kids in your business. If we have a client that is interested in this tax strategy, we can say, hey, go check out this podcast episode we did, and then come back to me, and then let's dig into the weeds a little bit. Because this podcast episode is going to give you an overview, a high-level idea of the strategy, and then you come back to us once you understand that piece, and let's start the implementation phase. So it's a good opportunity for current clients. And then we also mix it into our marketing type stuff. So if we're sending out, if people are on our email list, we can easily pinpoint back to different topics from podcast episodes. So it's been really, really good. I would say as far as client development, the way that why we decided to take a three-prong approach for it. So it's not just about business development, and it's also about helping our current clients out, is because that gives us the idea that this is being useful, whether we get clients from it or not. This is still a useful strategy. And so we have got clients from it. We have people reaching out to us, but as you mentioned, a lot of them aren't the greatest fit for us. And so we'll find another solution for them. We'll say, hey, I know this other guy focuses in your industry. He's going to be the one to talk to, and I'll refer them to another accountant. And that also kind of builds trust, saying, hey, you guys are willing to send me to somebody else, and they're good accountants. So the podcast has really been a key point in our business, and just a continuous weekly thing. It also keeps me fresh because I'm constantly having to think of new things to talk about. And so without that pressure of saying, hey, I got to get a podcast done this week, I might be lazy and say, I don't want to dig into this new program that the government, put out there because it really doesn't affect my clients. Well, now I can say, I'm going to dig into it, learn about it, because I got to talk about it for 5 to 10 minutes long. And then I want to be able to share that with, maybe it only affects 1% of my client base. Great. I can help out that 1%, but then also provide a community of other listeners that may be on clients of ours.
Exactly. I want to move into, so the way that we met is that you're part of a group called the Virtual Family Office Hub. Um, can you tell us a little bit, what is the Virtual Family Office Hub, and what is it that they offer you that that has attracted you to that affiliation?
Yeah, so the VFO Hub has been great for us, and working with the team over there has been incredible. But the best way that I can say is when we're talking about tax strategies that we can implement with clients, we have something that we call baseline tax strategies. And these are going to be strategies like setting up a retirement plan, setting up hiring your kids. These are strategies that whether you're making $80,000 a year or $800,000 a year, you can implement these strategies. But once those are exhausted, so these are strategies that any business owner of any size can implement. Once those are exhausted, we need to look above and say, okay, your income's getting up there, your high net worth. What can we do now to provide even more tax savings to you? And that's where the VFO Hub has been very helpful in us, is because we're able to introduce our clients to high-end tax strategies that are not just something you're going to find written on a Forbes article or anything like that. These are high-end tax strategies that are complex. And the beauty about the VFO Hub is that they do the legwork to find the best professionals for each strategy. They do the legwork to make sure that that strategy is legitimate and not something that's going to get you audited and put you in jail. And so they work with, they're the kind of that expertise which allows us to be confident to look at these tax strategies that the VFO Hub introduces to us, which has already been vetted by them. But then we can do additional vetting on top of it alongside of our client and finding out what is the best place to set them in that specific tax strategy. And so as a small firm like us, 8 people, we don't have the manpower, the ability to be experts in all these strategies. Mm-hmm. And that's where that affiliation with the VFO Hub has really been excellent for our firm, because we're able to lean on them for the expertise on those certain items, but we're still able to vet them on our end when they're specific to specific clients. So, there might be two high-end tax strategies that one is good for one client, but bad for another. And that's something that we do in our vetting process with them is we say, hey, we've gone through this and this tax strategy isn't really good for you, but fortunate enough, there's another one over here that we can introduce you to. And so that's kind of the process that we take with VFO Hub, and they've been key to that high-end tax strategy part of our business. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of accounting firms say, we don't have the manpower to do it in-house, so we're just not going to do it. Yep. And now you have all these high net worth individuals that are your clients that are paying way too much in taxes than they're supposed to, simply because the accountant doesn't either want to have an affiliation, or it's just easy enough, because these strategies they're not easy. They're complex and they cost money. Yep. And so they feel like it's too hard to try to sell it, or too hard to try to explain to a client why it's made for them. And so there's like, we're just going to avoid it. Yeah. But the problem is you're doing such a disservice to your client base by doing that. Whereas if you partner with someone that's trusted, vetted, and just a leader in this space, you're able to kind of put that as more of a back office, as if they're almost part of your team. And that's how we look at VFO Hub, is they're our advanced tax strategy part of our team. And so we're not afraid to introduce clients to them when clients are ready for them, which we kind of make that judgment and say, hey, you're ready to enter into that realm. We're introducing them immediately.
That's awesome. From a client acquisition standpoint, because I find this is interesting, is that the advanced tax strategies, oftentimes can be quote unquote sexy, meaning, if you take, one that we're both familiar with, the potential to, I think it's, save 99% or is it 90% or 99% on capital gains and different things. I mean, that just pops. I mean, from a marketer, that's like, wow, that's exciting. And by the same token, these things are fairly complex, right? I mean, it's not something that you just, the sales cycle can be long. I mean, really, in many cases, it can be considered what's called elephant hunting, meaning that the payoff could be substantial, but also the process of getting someone comfortable and doing it can also be quite a journey. What I think is remarkable about your approach is that you serve clients from, I would say, entry-level needs up until very sophisticated planning strategies and everything in between. what do you find is the most effective for your business in terms of bringing on new clients? Is it more the bread and butter and then giving you the opportunity to provide more services as they become a client and add trust and you identify needs? Or do you find it's better to go after them on the top end in terms of client acquisition? But does that question make sense?
Yeah, in really the approach that we typically take is let's start at more of the bottom end, because a lot of these tax strategies, when you're talking about advanced tax strategies, everyone's heard the story of this guy that sold them or their brother, their family member, this tax strategy, and now they're sitting in jail or they ended up having to pay this big old tax bill.
Of course, nowadays you can go to jail for operating your small business.
Yeah. There's so many horror stories around tax strategies because you're dealing with the government and they don't take fraud lightly. It's something that they take pretty seriously. So the biggest thing when you're doing these high-end tax strategies is you're right. They sound too good to be true. Mm-hmm. And the reason that is because they're you're using the tax code to your advantage. Yep. and really digging into that. And so does the IRS outline these as, yes, this is a tax strategy to save taxes? No, they don't tell anything about this tax strategy, but it's understanding the code that make this tax strategy available. Yep. And so for our clients, we find that in order for them to be able to feel comfortable signing up for one of these tax strategies or implementing one of these tax strategies, they have to know, like, and trust the person that they're working with.
Exactly.
So that's why we normally find that relationship is where we grow up with them and say, okay, let's enter these baseline tax strategies. We're going good. We're saving taxes. You had a huge year. Now let's maybe step up that ground. At this point, we already have that relationship built with them.
Exactly.
And the other key aspect of it is that these tax strategies, they're not just a for sure thing for everybody. Mm-hmm. So it's not just, oh, you made $1 million this year, this is your tax strategy. Mm-hmm. A lot of them have to do with, what does your future look like? What's your family breakdown look like? How old are you? Do you plan to sell? Do you plan to give your family your business? Those are a lot of things that factor into play, which will change what type of strategy you want to implement. So it's not as easy as saying, hey, you make $1 million a year. Let's implement this strategy today for you. It's more so saying you make $1 million a year and you have 3 kids and you're looking to sell in 5 years and you're looking to do this. Now here's the strategy that's going to fit that. And so that's where that longer term relationship really helps in that type of, we're getting clients into that advanced tax strategies. And we've tried the flip side and saying, hey, someone comes to us that is in that state. They're saying, I got a huge tax bill coming to me because I sold my business this year and my accountant isn't helping out. What can I do? And we've said, we got a great solution for you. Let's sit down. Let's discuss your goals. Let's discuss your future a little bit, and let's find a strategy for you. And those ones are so much harder to get someone to buy into this idea that I can save 99% of my tax bill, or I can save 60% of my tax bill, because it's higher end. They cost money. It's not just filing a form to implement this type of strategy. And so there is a high level of trust there, no matter how good the benefit is. And I've seen people walk away from a potential $2.5 million in tax savings to say, I'm just going to pay it, because they don't feel comfortable yet. And it just blows my mind. But I understand at the same time is that this is big stuff and they need to have that trust in there. And that's why, we try to, when we're talking with other accountants, we take an approach where I don't look at another accountant as competition to me. I think there's plenty of businesses out there that we can help each other out in this journey. Not every accountant feels that way, but the ones that do, I'm saying you need to look into these strategies for your business owners. I'm not necessarily saying refer them to me. I'm just saying this is something that your clients are missing out on. And I think that you could provide a much better value by implementing something like this, because you already have that trust built up into it. Yep. Now you're just disservicing your clients by having them pay a tax bill that might not even be necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to be clear, when you said, when you have that example of someone that could have saved, I believe you said $2.5 million or something along those lines, and they ended up walking away, my assumption there is that was not a long-term client of yours. In other words, the opportunity came, but because you didn't have the relationship with them, even though it seemed like potential on paper, it seemed like a good idea. They weren't comfortable moving forward because the relationship didn't exist already. Would that be a fair assessment?
Exactly. And what that client ended up doing is they ended up going with a tax strategy. It just wasn't the one that we introduced them to.
Yeah.
But the tax strategy was a tenth of the tax savings. But it was very simple, very easy, pretty common. Most accountants would know it without even working with the VFO Hub.
Yeah.
And so they can find so much information on it. And, it's a much more, if you don't have that relationship built up, it's saying, yeah, I mean, I can do this. It's safe. There's no worries there. But if we would have had that long-term relationship already built into it, they would have dived into this without even questioning it.
Exactly.
Because of how much tax they can save. Now, a lot of people are at this point in their life and they say, hey, I'm having a big payday no matter what, whether I pay taxes or not on it. I'm having a big payday. So some people say, I'm just going to bite the bullet and pay the taxes, or at least a portion of the taxes, using this easier to understand, easier to implement strategy. But again, that's just a disservice to so many business owners that are in that are fortunate enough to be in that place of either a large payday via a sale or just running a really fine-tuned business that is very successful. They're just unfortunate that they have to pay, some of them, make that decision to pay more than necessary.
Well, and I think what you're bringing up really is, it's as much as saving taxes is important, people, even more importantly, fundamentally, is avoiding risk.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If there's any sense that there's risk involved in that, and what I mean by that is that, it comes down to that relationship with their tax professional, in this case, you. If they don't have that existing relationship, people are going to sense some level of risk if it's a little bit complex or whatnot. So what I love about what you guys do is that you really help your clients from A to Z. You're not what I would call the typical firm, which, just focuses on the large numbers of people and helps them with the basics. You do that, but you also have the ability to help them with the more advanced stuff as it makes sense for them. Conversely, a lot of people want to work with people just on the high level stuff, but don't have the relationship and the trust in place to work with people and build the right or build the opportunity to work with them on that stuff. And so I really love the model that you have. Along those lines, this show is for primarily financial advisors. So for a financial advisor watching this, especially maybe if they work, with attorneys or, have that niche developed, what opportunities potentially would maybe a wealth advisor or someone like that have in, collaborating with you, referring with you, talking to you? Is there an opportunity for them to benefit from the services that you provide for both them and their clients?
Yeah. And so we do this a lot where, business owners have so many different resources of help. They have their attorney, they have their financial advisor, they have their accountant, they might have, a business coach. There's so many different sources of information that they're utilizing because they're successful business owners. But the problem with that is the traditional way of doing that is that all of these service levels are in silos. Mm-hmm. You have the lawyer that's saying, do this. You have the financial advisor that's saying, do this. And you have the accountant that's saying, doing this. And all of a sudden they're getting all this information and they're saying, the advisor told me to do this, but the accountant's telling me to do this, which both could be viable and real options. But because they're not talking to each other, they don't necessarily understand the situation on that side. So as an accountant, if I'm not talking to the financial advisor, there might be things that I don't know about their financial picture that could change a different type of strategy that I want to implement with them. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we always tell clients is we want to create this powerhouse team for you. I don't care who your lawyer is, who your financial advisor is. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to try to refer you to my people. I'm just going to say, I just want to work with them. And I want to make sure that we're working as a team so that when we come to you, we've talked to the lawyer, the financial advisor, and the accountant have all talked. And we're saying collectively, based on the information that all of us know, we come to you and we're going to present this to you. And so we simply start out with like an information sharing agreement where the client signs and says, yep, the accountant can share the information with the financial advisor and the lawyer they can all share their information together so that we can hash this out together without even having to involve the client. Yeah. Because if the client, and this is just a very basic example, but it's one that I utilize, is if the financial advisor is saying, set up a SEP IRA,
Mhm.
and the accountant is saying, set up a solo 401k.
Mhm.
Now the client has to come and make that decision.
Mhm.
And both of them might be great options. But if the financial advisor and the accountant talk beforehand,
Yeah.
they might say, okay, let's tell them one thing. Let's tell them just do the solo 401k, because now we're on the same page. And now the client isn't sitting there confused.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just big. Business owners are filled with so much information on a regular day-to-day business that then having to make a decision from various
Yep.
inputs is just so difficult for them. So that's one thing that we always try with our clients. We say, let's introduce us to your financial advisor, introduce us to your lawyer, so that we can be on the same page as them. We can communicate this stuff together, and we can make a decision based on the collective knowledge and then present that to you.
Yeah.
And we might present two opportunities to them,
Sure.
but now we're all on the same page and can say, so we talked, here's two options. Here's the reason why we like each one or the other. Here's the one that we collectively recommend. But there's, of course, the second option that you can go with if you feel more comfortable with that. And so that's the biggest thing with working with financial advisors and any advisor to a business owner is just making sure everybody's on the same page and communicating not in silos, but together as a team.
Yeah, that's awesome. Final thoughts. So based off of everything that we talked today, is there anything that you feel is important in terms of marketing strategy that we haven't covered or that you'd like to underscore?
I would just say that, everyone says niche down, niche down, niche down, and that's something that we've done. But it's more than just saying, I want to pick this niche and that's what I'm going to go with. I think it's really important to, one, find out what that niche is and make sure that you enjoy working with them and make sure that you enjoy the type of work that you're going to be doing specific to that niche.
Yep.
And so, finding the perfect niche is good. But then also knowing that once you get in there, not everybody in that industry is going to be perfect for you either. So as a generalist business owner that serves anybody and everybody, you need to have the mentality that, and this might be the first step, is to say, not everybody is going to be a perfect client of ours. And then when you make that step deeper and say, okay, now we're specializing in this industry, you have to maintain that mindset that says, not everybody's going to be a perfect client of ours. And that's really what we found out in the fitness space, because we thought we were just going to be fitness experts. But then what we found out is we were getting a lot of these hobby businesses, which it was hard for us to service them because they weren't out there to make a big profit, and there wasn't much advice, guidance that we could give them as to someone that's looking to build a fitness empire. And so that was our point of saying, we cannot, we have to, our idea of saying we're going to take in every fitness studio quickly turned to say, we still have to be picky and choosy, because not every client we're going to be able to service, and they're not going to see the value that we provide depending on what their specific situation is.
Yeah, that's awesome. What is the best people, and we'll add this to the show notes, what is the best way for people to reach out to you, whether it's a potential attorney or whether it's a financial advisor? Yeah,
so you can find us right on our website. It's www.jetrotax. It's JETROTAX.com. We're pretty visible. We're all over the internet. We have a podcast, which is a small business tax savings podcast. And pretty much on any social media, you can find us. We're very visible when it comes to social media and providing everything that we can out there.
Very cool. Actually, that prompts. I do have one final question for you. Because you have these two different niches, and so far you have one client that meets both of them, right? The lawyer that owns the fitness studio. How do you keep your marketing, your online presence such that each one feels at home? Meaning that how do you tackle both niches without having them conflict?
Yeah, so a lot of it on our website, we have a certain space that they can go to. If you're a fitness studio, go here, and that's going to give tell you a little bit about how we can help you. But the biggest thing we found is building a list, building a following. And so once we can get people into our list and say, okay, they're a fitness client of ours, or not a fitness prospect of ours, we can make sure that all the information that's going to them is fitness related. Same thing with the attorneys. Once we find someone that came to us, they downloaded an ebook or listened to a webinar on attorneys, they automatically fall into that attorney side of our business, which we can then specialize and cater the content that's going out to them. So that is tough. And we decided when we started to niche down, we're saying, do we start another firm or for another firm name that says, fitness
Right.
accountant and lawyer accountants?
Yeah.
And we decided not to because we wanted to embrace the full company that we had and our vision in that company, but we still cater our various marketing efforts or content creation to the people that are in those specific lists of ours. So creating that following, creating that list. Now, there's going to be clients that aren't in a list, but still followers, and they're just going to kind of feel and hear information on both sides of it. But eventually, I think they'll lean and say, hey, this is a book that's specific to me. I want to download that. Or here's a webinar specific to me. I want to dig into that. And then they're going to fall into that side of the list category.
Then, of course, you have your other list with so far one person who's a follower of it, right?
Yeah. We have the one guy that fits into that weird, unique lawyer and fitness studio owner.
If only you could duplicate him, you would be the king of this, the king of this niche.
Yeah, if only we could find 1,000 of him, we would just be able to start a firm that is just specific niching to lawyers who own fitness studios. But I don't think there's many of them out there. So
I know. As a business coach, I don't recommend it.
Yeah, we'll continue going down the road of two niches.
There you go. Well, this has been fantastic. I've personally enjoyed this conversation a lot. I love your expertise. I love your marketing savvy and just everything that you're doing as a company to help your clients. And so thank you for being a guest on today's episode of the $1 Million Producer Show.
Thanks, Paul, for having me. I appreciate it.